Hey, it's Hunt. You found Hunt on Saints. We're talking black and gold football. Do us a favor. Hit the like button, share your comments below, and hit that subscription button so you can get all of our content. Enjoy. Rolling along here, Monday edition of Hunt Palmer Show, presented by Gulf Coast Office Products. Monday Night Football tonight from Arrowhead up in Kansas City. It'll be the Saints and the defending world champion Kansas City Chiefs. Ross Jackson covers the Saints for LouisianaSports.net as well as Locked On Saints. Joins us now on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Ross, how we doing?
Hey, man, doing great. Glad to be here with you.
Glad you are here with us. All right, let's talk injuries. They were the dominant story late in the week last week with the New Orleans Saints, specifically on the offensive line. Where do we stand right now at center? Because Chris Jones is not a lot of fun to deal with.
Yeah, he's definitely not the player that you want to be going up against with a hurt interior offensive line. But there's a good chance here that this evening that the Saints will be starting their third straight new starting center in as many games. They started that Philadelphia Eagles game with Eric McCoy under center. They only had him for 3 snaps. Then Shane Lemieux last week, and then now it seems likely that Connor McGovern will end up taking over at center here throughout this game against Kansas City Chiefs. So it's going to be a third time in 3 weeks they'll have a new center there. There's a chance that Lucas Patrick could potentially be in that conversation as well, but he's questionable going into this game after suffering an injury during the practice week. So it seems likely that the Saints will not only have a new face to their team this week, but also a new starter. He'll also be their new starter at center.
Is the concern more so with Jones in the pass rush or in his ability to disrupt New Orleans' running game?
I would say when it comes to Chris Jones, you're probably more concerned about what he contributes in the pass rush. He moves around the defensive line. He kind of gets to just pick where it is that he takes snaps, which is what happens when you're one of the best defensive players in the NFL. And so because he moves around quite a bit, he could be a little bit hard to keep an eye on and contain. But him taking snaps on the interior up against a new starting center, a second week starting right guard, and a potentially new starting left guard as well. Remember, if Lucas Patrick can't go, then that would still mean somebody else would at least have to step in at left guard. And that might be Nick Saldiveri. That is kind of what I'm expecting, but it could, Saints could go another direction. He's going to get a lot of opportunity to present some disruption and what is the closest pathway point to Derek Carr, which is on that interior. So I would expect that that's where he ends up having a pretty big impact for this team, for the Kansas City Chiefs at least, and that's a big thing that the New Orleans Saints need to be concerned about.
So look, obviously with that many new faces on the offensive line trying to work together for the first time, I mean, what is the plan here for Klint Kubiak and the offense to try to help those guys a little bit?
Yeah, the good news about McGovern, if he is indeed the starting center as we expect in this game, is that he's very familiar with the Kubiak run scheme and the philosophies of the Kubiak run system. He's familiar with Gary Kubiak. He also has worked with Rick Dennison, who is the New Orleans Saints run game coordinator. He's also worked with John Benton, the New Orleans Saints offensive line coach, back during his days with the New York Jets. And so the good news is that there's familiarity in terms of the run game. So I think part of what you're trying to do here is see if you can get your run game going against this Kansas City Chiefs defense, which has been very good against the run and has been particularly very good against the zone run concepts across the league. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but I think that that's going to be your plan if you're Klint Kubiak, is try to alleviate as much pressure on Derek Carr as possible by getting that run game going. Not something super unique to what it is they typically do, but particularly with a struggling, or not struggling, but an interior offensive line in flux, if you will. You're going to want to make sure you're backing that defensive front off by making them respect your run game, and then see if you're able to take advantage of that in the passing game.
I've been heaping praise all over Alvin Kamara because I don't know that I would agree with the Saints putting a bunch of money into a new contract for him, but he's going out there and giving it everything he's got, even though he's not super thrilled with that contract situation. How do we know about, or what do we know about how well Alvin Kamara is feeling physically right now?
Yeah, he did move back up to being full this week. Remember, he played with those broken ribs last week. I had also read about a hip pointer for him, too, so a couple different things there, or heard about, rather. A hip pointer there for him too, and so I think that that was such a, to your point, such a huge showing, right? A guy that's looking for a new contract and guarantees in his future and everything like that, didn't get it and still goes out there and plays through injury the way that he did, literally putting his body on the line at what is a very physical position to play, which is part of the reason why teams typically don't give running backs contracts, because of that very reason. And so there he goes, still going out there and getting it done. So I think he does deserve that praise. But I think from a health perspective, he's I wouldn't say he's back to week one health, but it sounds like he's at least better health-wise than he was last week, getting up to full participation for the first time in some time. So that's good news, trending in the right direction there.
Ross Jackson's our guest, covers the Saints for us for LouisianaSports.net, also Locked On Saints podcast. If you're looking for your Saints information, no better source here than our guy, Ross Jackson. Let's flip it around and talk about this Chiefs offense that's kind of been okay through an undefeated month. They've obviously got a pretty good quarterback, but what have you seen from this Chiefs offense through a month?
Yeah, this is a Chiefs offense that's winning because of the help of its defense right now, if we're being honest, right? I mean, it's not to say, like, I should preface this by saying this is still the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Like, no matter what, you're going up against Patrick Mahomes, you're going up against Andy Reid, you're going up against Travis Kelce. It's still going to be a good offense. But, their explosive plays are down so far this year. They're third lowest in the NFL with only 16. That's defined by passes of more than 20 yards and rushes of more than 10 yards. You have an offense right now that's picking up, for Patrick Mahomes, 64.8% of his passing yards have come after the catch. So it's been very dink and dunk. And then it's been the yak yards that have kind of helped out the offense. So for New Orleans, the big thing is going to be, can they tackle at the catch point? Can they limit yards after catch and thereby hamper and limit a little bit of what you get from that Kansas City Chiefs offense? They're gonna get theirs here and there, but can you minimize the impact by not letting gains turn into big gains or explosive plays? That's going to be the big measure for the New Orleans Saints defense, even though they're going up against an offense that doesn't look very Kansas City Chiefsian at this time.
Yeah, we talk about the Saints' defensive backs probably being the strength of this entire roster, and the Chiefs are real low on pass catchers at this point. So is that New Orleans' biggest advantage in this game?
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely one of them. The Saints having a very strong secondary with Tyrann Mathieu being back to full over the course of this week, going into the game with no injury designation. They have their starting corners. Alontae Taylor has been awesome here to open up this season. I would say he's been one of the Saints' three best players so far this season. And so I think that's where the Saints have their best kind of matchup. The other thing that goes along with that is that the Kansas City Chiefs are turning the ball over at a high rate. The New Orleans Saints are taking the ball away at a high rate. And so I think that's another thing. And that secondary has been a big part of that takeaway, that sort of influx of takeaways here to open up the season.
How would you describe the energy around this team right now? We know it was unbelievable after 2 weeks, and obviously they've taken it on the chin the last 2 weeks. I mean, how would you describe the vibe that's around the team right now?
Yeah, it's definitely not as sort of, big and boisterous as it was over the course of the first 2 weeks, but I don't think that this is a team that's necessarily down on itself either with the New Orleans Saints. Being in the locker room all throughout the week last week, this is a team that feels very driven, very pointed. They're not pointing fingers at one another. They're pointing fingers back at themselves for the most part whenever you speak to them and everything. And that's a good culture to have in this situation. I don't know how much longer that culture lasts if you get back to sort of this roller coaster of winning a couple of games, losing a couple of games, winning a couple of games, losing a couple of games. Like, that would put that to the test. And so nothing is going to make the culture better than winning games, but it sounds like that's the ideal, or not the ideal, but that's kind of the push for this New Orleans Saints team so far, is to maintain their continuity, maintain their chemistry, and start to continue to push forward despite the adversity, despite the attrition, and start trying to win games again so they can get back to kind of how fun they were to open up the season.
Did the Falcons win over Tampa back on Thursday kind of change the way you look at the division?
Yeah, it really did. I'm so glad you asked about that, because really, I mean, look, no one's, or at least not many people, are going to pick the Saints up against the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah. Lord knows I'm not. It's still the Kansas City Chiefs. And so what that win for Atlanta did was that it knocked Tampa Bay Buccaneers down to a 3-2 record. That means that even if the Saints come out of this week 2-3, they host the Tampa Bay Buccaneers next week, who, to be honest, are going to kind of have it rough next week, right? They're going to New Orleans early on Tuesday to avoid the impact of Hurricane Milton, which just went up to a Category 5. They typically wouldn't travel until Saturday, so there's going to be a lot of turmoil for that team. And you feel bad for them, but you also have to compete against them if you're the New Orleans Saints. And so the Saints could even up the 3-3 record with Tampa Bay and a head-to-head win that could give them second place in the division, even with a loss this week. So that's where I think, or that's why I think that Atlanta win really shook things up for the NFC South and really actually helped the New Orleans Saints in terms of their outlook coming out of this week, win or lose.
Enjoy Arrowhead tonight, Ross. Appreciate the time, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Take care, stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sure will. He's Ross Jackson. Locked On Saints podcast, as well as LouisianaSports.net. Ross there in Kansas City. He'll be writing some stories for us this evening. And hey, it's on. Thanks for watching Hunt on Saints. Before you leave, help us out a little bit. Hit that like button, leave your comments in the section below, and hit that subscribe button so you get all our content right here from Hunt on Saints. We'll see you next time.